Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by.
At Villeries Florist, we deliver the magic of flowers 7 days a week to the North Shore and South Shore in the New Orleans area. Whether it's for birthday parties, baby celebrations, Villeries provides colorful floral displays for all. With a store full of fresh-cut flowers, exotic tropical flowers, orchids, roses, and even fruit baskets, our goal is to make your vision a reality. Villeries Florist, proudly serving Louisiana since 1969.
Dave Miette Insurance Agency, 504-556-0809 or davemietteINSagency.com.
For over 48 years, Southern Tires and Auto Repair has provided services across the New Orleans metro area. Southern Tires offers a range of tires for all vehicles and ATVs. We also have a full suite of auto repair options, including brake repair, rim repair, custom exhaust, steering and suspension, and so much more. Southern Tires and Auto Repair, 2550 Hickory Avenue in Metairie.
Cnc Drugs is a family-owned pharmacy that's been serving Southeast Louisiana for over 50 years. Whether you need help taking care of an elderly family member, a growing child, or even a pet, Cnc provides patient-centered care for your entire family. Cnc Drugs, large enough to serve you, small enough to know you. Locations in Mandeville and Araby.
Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports, live from our state-of-the-art Pontchartrain production studios. I'm your host, Eric Asher, and of course we are now streaming live on YouTube on the WLAE-TV YouTube page. So again, a couple ways to catch us live here on a Thursday. Of course, we'll cover all the home teams today, the Saints, LSU, Tulane, Pelicans, UNO. We'll talk about some high school sports as well. To break it down for us, one of the best we have in the city, from 106.1 FM, from CrescentCitySports.com, Ken Trahan joins us on the program today. And also, I got to say, Saints Hall of Fame as well. So many hats. We'd probably be here for an hour talking about everything he does. But Ken, welcome back to the show.
Do we have enough time?
No, we don't. But you can get into some of it.
Nice to be here, Eric. Thanks for having me.
Good to have you. Why don't you tell us a little, first of all, fantastic job with the website. I hype it all the time. I think it's the best sports website we have in this city. And of course, the fantastic job you guys do with your show, All Access, and of course the longest running sports radio show in the city, the Three Tailgaters. Tell us about all of it.
Well, you just hit on it pretty good. You know, the Three Tailgaters show, we've been doing that since 1994. The original Prep Football Report on Friday night since 1995. And of course, our show's on 106.1, which you're part of now, is fantastic. And it's been a great marriage. We really appreciate what's happening at Cumulus. So that's been terrific. And of course, I put up with Ed Daniels every Saturday. That's not easy to do, but somebody has to do it. With regard to CrescentCitySports.com, it's a 24/7, 365 enterprise. We are very pleased with where it's gone in 12 and a half years. We have wonderful people that help make it happen. You have to be on top of it every hour of the day to be able to make it work. And of course, we get an enormous amount of traffic on the Saints and LSU in particular, somewhat on Pelicans and Tulane, but our biggest price point is high school sports, unquestionably. And that's because of the incredible passion that exists for all sports, and we cover every high school sport, and we also do a lot of games on the website. So it's something that's a labor of love. Being born and raised like you are, love doing it. It fostered so many great relationships on the high school level, and that's always going to be my champion cause, if you will.
Yeah, and you've done a great job with it. Both you and Ed Daniels have done a fantastic job in highlighting prep sports here in this town. Before we get started, let's talk a little prep sports because there's some championships this weekend. Your site, CrescentCitySports.com, will be involved in it. Wrestling championships in Baton Rouge.
Yeah, right? we're at the River Center now.
Okay.
It's been in Bossier the last several years, and moving to Baton Rouge is obviously more advantageous for everyone because with the sport of wrestling in Louisiana, when you got 83 schools wrestling and 68 of them are south of I-10, it only makes sense to be in anywhere that corridor from New Orleans to Lafayette. And it's in Baton Rouge. Therefore, it's going to be a better situation. It won't be better attended because of the attendance limitations that are in place, and there's a lot of different prohibitions, if you will, for this particular event. But I've been doing this for 30 years, and I do the PA for the finals, and of course we blog the whole time we're there, and we have stories both days, interviews with everybody, and it's a sport I have a tremendous affection for and great relationships with all the coaches and the people. So we'll be there all day and night, Friday and Saturday. The finals are Saturday evening. The state soccer championships are going on as we speak in Hammond. Out of the 16 finalists, 9 are from the New Orleans area, which is remarkable on the boys and girls sides, and those have been going on since Wednesday, so full coverage there as well. Basketball, Final Fours are coming up next week, so we'll be there too and covering that. That's what we do at CrescentCitySports.com, so it's a very busy time with high school sports and really with sports across the board.
No, I would agree. We lost a legend on Monday. Bob Rossler, the longtime sports editor for the Times-Picayune, and then, of course, I think he was executive sports editor for the Picayune and Item when they merged. You and I are contemporaries. We grew up with this guy. We were so lucky to have Pete Finney, Buddy D. You can talk about Hab Glaudy. When you talk about Finney and Rossler on the same paper, I was talking about it yesterday on the radio show. We had the Picayune thrown to the house, right? The paper would throw that in the house in the morning, and then, of course, the green sheet with the old States Item in the afternoon. So, you know, you'd run to the paper store or to the paper box of the store to grab your green sheet because you'd get Rossler in the morning and then Finney in the afternoon, and then eventually it ended up merging. You know these guys. You worked with them for years and years and years. Just your thoughts on the life's work of Bob Rossler.
I think it was absolutely remarkable. When I grew up as a youngster, I looked up to people of this nature, as you did. All these names that you mentioned, Champ Clark was another I put in there who was, again, somebody that I gravitated to at a young age doing high school games and never had any idea who he was or what he looked like or anything else, and that's a good thing because all it did was illustrate that it's about the person. It's not about where you come from, what you look like, or anything else. So all those guys were not only iconic figures, but they were very good at what they did. Bob was incredibly fair. I think that's the best word to use with him. He was never going to be bought, per se. Therefore, one week you might see something very positive about the New Orleans Saints. The next week you'd see something very negative. One week you'd see something incredibly positive about a sport that he loved, horse racing, and the next week he was calling it unfair grounds, which he did for about a year and a half in an ongoing feud that was transpiring. But he would always rely on fact to present what he did, and I thought Les East of our website did a great job of writing about Bob because it illustrated about who he was. I thought it captured his personality perfectly, where Les got a tip on the same story, and Bob, much older, and his boss told him, no, kid, you go with it. You got the same information. It's your beat. You go with it. So he wasn't about gaining recognition for himself or trying to be grandiose and say, look at me. He was all about just getting the facts right and presenting them in that fashion. And I think that that's probably his greatest legacy. He was on our Saints Hall of Fame Media Selection Committee from the start and was an incredibly valued member because of his vast knowledge of the franchise and the fact that he was here from day one. And oh, by the way, he played a significant role in helping that franchise arrive here. With his particular column that he had and the voice that he had and the platform that he had, he utilized that to help convince NFL moguls to put that team here. He played a very significant role. Everybody knows about Russell Long and everybody knows about Hale Boggs and the others that were involved in that process, but Bob Rossler played a very significant role in that too.
Also, again, and Les, as you mentioned, a great column on CrescentCitySports.com, having worked side by side with him, talked about, again, what he did for this city in terms of landing Super Bowls. And of course, eventually, all the owners' meetings were coming to New Orleans. Again, he was a big part of that as well.
He was. Again, he was recognized. Pete Rozelle in particular was friends with him. And the Touchdown Club ended up creating a Pete Rozelle Award, which they still present annually. And Bob was instrumental in that. Bob received it at one point as well. But he had this relationship with the power brokers in really all professional sports, more so with the NFL than any, that enabled him to help shape some opinion and to help to get New Orleans looked upon in positive fashion. And that had to happen. When you look at the grand scheme of things, I mentioned the politicians, the Russell Longs and the Hale Boggs certainly come to mind. But certainly when you look at the overarching picture of how we ended up where we ended up, Dave Dixon would be Exhibit A from his incredible efforts over so many years to help that occur. and then of course the politicians, and then there's Bob Rustler.
Right.
I think those were the people that were most instrumental in New Orleans having an NFL franchise, which we celebrate today in incredible fashion.
No doubt about it. Again, just we were fortunate. I said it yesterday on the radio show, how fortunate we were, people that grew up in our era, to have the type of voices and the type of writers that we grew up with. That really shaped a lot of what we do, right?
Right, and I think, and Pete Finney was a guy that I loved and I had an incredibly good relationship with.
Yes.
We became very good friends and have so much respect for him. When we elected him to receive the Joe Gemelli Fleur-de-Lis Award from the Saints Hall of Fame, and he was on the selection committee, he's in the room at the time, and he was all mad, shaking his head, no, don't do that, no, I'm walking out and everything else. I said, you're not walking out, sit down. I got mad and I was indignant, said, no one deserves this more than you with what you've done, and he reluctantly ended up accepting it, but I think it was a reflection of his character as well. And another guy that was unbelievably fair and universally respected.
Yes.
It's kind of hard to find somebody to say anything negative about Pete in this day and age. Every day, you and I can get blasted by anybody on social media or anything else, and it's not fun. We don't like it, and yet we understand it's part of the dialogue, and we also understand and support free speech, and that people have an opinion. They should be able to voice that opinion. But in the case of Pete, and even Bob, I think that it was kind of hard to find a dissenting voice. People just really liked and respected them for what they did. No
doubt about it. And of course, both guys did a tremendous job. Of course, Pete Finney in the NFL Hall of Fame as well, went in the same year as Ricky Jackson.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Ricky Jackson. A quick aside, when Pete was on the selection committee for the Pro Football Hall of Fame, Ricky, 2 straight years, didn't get a whole lot of support at all. There were some off-the-field issues that had to be addressed, and I got involved in it without getting into detail because I'm very close to Ricky, and I'm very close to the family situation that he's involved in, and the parties that were involved in it, I was able to kind of get in the middle and mediate a little bit and clear up some things. And I did a story and broke a story and did an interview with Ricky and with the other family members, which basically told the public, this isn't true,
Right.
and he doesn't owe money and this kind of stuff, and he's a great father, the whole deal, including his son saying that in the interview that we did.
I remember it.
So Pete then took it to the committee, and he used that as a tool to be able to show people that let's get over this quote-unquote character issue. Let's look at this man for what he accomplished, and oh, by the way, this character thing is not real. And what ended up happening, that's the year he got elected.
Yes.
So Pete played a significant role in that happening as well. And oh, by the way, had Bob been healthy at that time, he'd have done the same thing.
Yeah, I would bet, no doubt. Let's talk a little about the Saints. Well, let's talk about something that's really breaking today. There's been whispers of this over the last few weeks, but really this has really been caught fire today. Russell Wilson is asking for a trade from the Seattle Seahawks. There's been 4 teams that have been mentioned, the Dolphins, the Raiders, the Jets, and the Saints. And, you know, a lot of people talk about Deshaun Watson and what it would take to get Deshaun Watson. And look, he's a terrific player. But if you're telling me there's an opportunity to get a Russell Wilson in New Orleans, I'm saying you pull out all stops. And that means draft choices and players to get that done. I'd love to get your take.
Well, it's interesting. If you look at the guys in the league right now who have some contract situations, Dak Prescott comes to mind. And he's a quality person aside from being a good player. But Deshaun Watson, I think, is a quality person and a little bit better player than Prescott, in my opinion.
Sure.
Then there's Russell Wilson, who has been a proven commodity. He's won a Super Bowl, almost won a second, should have, but they call the wrong play. And in addition to that, he's still in his prime. He can still make all the throws. He's got great mobility. He's a guy that can run and not get hurt.
Yes.
He's proven that over a long time.
Right.
Why? Because he's intelligent about when he does take off and when to get down. He had 2 good receivers this past year in Seattle, and for half a season he was probably the MVP of the league. Then they kind of fizzled out a bit in the second half, and part of that was why he's not happy right now. Their offensive line was not very good at all,
right,
and their running game wasn't what it needed to be. So Russell Wilson, absolute winner in every facet. He's a heck of a player. He's a tremendous human being, a fantastic guy, character off the charts, and in many ways somewhat similar to Breeze.
Yes.
Similar stature. The Mutual Admiration Society was noted on so many occasions. He's more mobile than Breeze.
Absolutely.
But he's a guy, and he's younger version and can make more throws at this stage. So I would be 1,000,000% behind any effort to get Russell Wilson. The problem is, what's it going to take to pull that off? if in fact he is made available. And I don't know that he will be made available, much like the Deshaun Watson situation.
Right. And look, it's interesting you say that because remember he's under contract, so Seattle doesn't have to make a move here. Cooler heads could prevail down the line here. But this one to me is intriguing because no, the Saints don't have the draft capital, especially where they're drafting, and that may not be something that would be attractive to Seattle. But the Saints do have players at positions of need that Seattle would covet.
Well, the Saints have some major assets. And the reason that Sean Payton and Mickey Loomis have said we're not rebuilding is because they still have a good roster. They still have many quality players on this roster to at least make them a 500 team, at the very least.
Right.
And I say that because the quarterback position is so important, obviously. And then the other part of that is, what are you going to have to give up if you want to move forward and get somebody transcendent rather than going with Jameis Winston or Taysom Hill, which I'm sure you'll get into.
Sure.
And either one of those could be your quarterback and may very well be your quarterback. I'd say probably will be one of those two at this point, although if there's any possibility to get Russell Wilson, I'd do it in a heartbeat. So I look at the roster. I think it's a pretty good roster still. With that in mind, they do have assets to be able to acquire someone like that, but the assets are your current players, not your draft picks.
No.
So, because you've already been eaten into with draft picks, and hopefully that doesn't happen anymore with any other sanctions, right? Stay tuned for that. I don't think that's going to happen, but you never know. So as a result, you look at some of the obvious guys. Who are the best players on your team? That's pretty obvious. You got a wide receiver, you got a cornerback, you got a running back who are transcendent players, and oh, by the way, you got 2 tackles who are too. So that's 5 guys to start with there. Is there any one of those guys that you might be willing to part with?
Right. Or maybe 2.
Or maybe 2. I'm not going to be the one to answer that question because I think all of those guys I mentioned are significant players and absolute positive guys you can build around.
Right.
And the Saints have been smart for many years. The reason they won more games in the regular season than anybody else over the past 3 years is because they built from the inside out. They addressed their offensive and defensive lines early in the draft, and it paid off. All you've got to do is look at the guys they have up front. The investments are astronomical. Rankins was a first-round pick. Davenport was a first-round pick. Jordan was a first-round pick. Ramczyk was a first-round pick. Ruiz is a first-round pick. Pete was a first-round pick. You get the picture.
Oh, yeah.
And even the others, Armstead was a second-round pick. Hendrickson was a fourth-round pick, a third-round pick, I should say. They were all investments. So they built from the inside out, and I think that's why they've won. I don't think they've had great skill ever. I think they've had good skill, and I think Kamara is exceptional. I think he is a great talent. I think Thomas is a very good talent, but not a guy that's going to beat you down the field by and large, but he's really good. And then on the defensive end, Lattimore is what everybody covets, a corner that can really take somebody away and is an above average to close to elite corner in the league. I think that's fair. And therefore, that's a really, really strong commodity to have in your possession. Cam Jordan is that type of player, but he's not young anymore. Demario Davis is absolutely that type of player and a franchise guy. Would you want to let him go? I'd say no. He's too good of a player and too much of a leader. Hendrickson, the contract's up, so that's not their call at this point. In that regard, that's all about whether they can pay him. So those are the guys we're talking about. So the question becomes, are there any 1 or 2 of those guys that you would be willing to part with to try to get Russell Wilson because you feel like Russell Wilson would be that far of an upgrade over a Taysom Hill or a Jameis Winston?
Right, no doubt. Two points. First of all, the Saints have been able to build inside out because they've had a quarterback, and they haven't been chasing a quarterback for 15 years. They've had one. It's what they again, the question mark is now. And the other part of that is, again, there's been a pretty good relationship between Seattle and New Orleans in terms of making trades. When you look at the situation with Jimmy Graham, et cetera, maybe that's revisited. The one question is, if they were ultimately going to trade Wilson, would they trade him within the NFC?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I think that if they're looking to make the best deal, I don't think it matters where they would trade him if they can get the assets they're looking for. The asking price is going to be significant. But again, if you look at recent history, the whole Stafford deal required an incredible investment to get him. In fact, it might have been too much, but we'll see. Only time will tell. Again, I'm fair-minded about that. But with regard to Carson Wentz, on the other hand, it didn't take much at all to get him, in my estimation. I think Indianapolis made a good deal. Not because Wentz is an elite quarterback, but because I think with Frank Reich and with good players around him, which he did not have in Philadelphia, I think he not only is salvageable, but I think he can be a good to above average NFL quarterback, and that's all they need in Indianapolis. They were good last year with Phillip Rivers in his final year in the NFL, so I think that was a good move, and they got him inexpensively. So who knows? Beauty's in the eye of the beholder. Maybe Seattle asks for the world, and they get something in between. And if that's the case, if you feel like you have that in-between package of a significant player or two and a significant draft pick, would you make that move for Russell Wilson?
Right.
I would.
Well, I would too. And again, draft choices probably not as attractive in this deal, but again, players that can come in and immediately turn your franchise around. The Saints have those players. And also in a salary cap strapped year, it might be a situation where you're looking at that, especially bringing on a contract like Russell Wilson. Let's talk about the salary cap. $180 million now. It could possibly still go up because of the NFL negotiations with their TV partners. I read something recently where they're looking about asking for a 100% increase over what they got previously. That will offset some of these COVID-19 losses. I think it's a smart move on the NFLPA's part and the NFL's part to be able to try to mitigate the losses in terms of just this year and allowing that to maybe spread that over a couple of years. And I think that's the direction they're going to go. With that said, I've said this all along, Ken. I'd love to get your take. I believe there's always been a plan post-Breeze on how they were going to attack the salary cap. They knew this was coming. They didn't know COVID-19, but they've had a full year now to know what's coming. I think they've already got their plan etched out on how they're going to retain the core of this team. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think they do too, because everybody's looking at right now and the contracts that are up right now, but I'm looking at next year.
Yes. Because
that's really where it's at with the Lattimores and the Ramcheks. There's some significant guys that come up that are absolutes for this team that you're going to have to deal with. Therefore, your plan can't just be for this year. It has to be for next year and maybe even the year after that. I think they know who the invaluable pieces are. And some of that might have to do with how old you are, time spent in the league, injuries, and so forth. And I think some of it might have to do with the position you play, because what's the most replaceable position on the field in the NFL in your estimation? I'm asking you now.
Replaceable?
Yeah, the easy
wide receiver.
Wide receiver and running back are probably the easiest positions to replace, and that doesn't mean that if you have an elite guy that you can easily replace him, because you can't. But running backs typically don't get drafted early because they're replaceable. Christian McCaffrey was the best overall running back in the league the year before, 2019, and then of course this year he got hurt, and they had plugged in Mike Davis, plugged in two guys who did a pretty good job, by the way, and did okay. Jacksonville had a 1,000-yard rusher in Leonard Fournette, then they just let him go. He went to Tampa Bay and played part-time, almost disappeared, but then when the playoffs rolled around, he looked like the guy we knew, and it's like, wow, big, fast, can catch out of the backfield, really good. Pittsburgh let go of Le'Veon Bell. Everybody thought they were dead. They replaced him with a guy in Connor who had a great year. Pittsburgh let go of a wide receiver, Antonio Brown, and Juju Smith-Schuster had a great year the next year. So I think we've seen evidence that you can replace wide receivers and running backs, and yet you can't just put garbage out there and expect to get results. Case in point being Philadelphia, where they had no running backs and no receivers, and oh, by the way, no offensive line. Therefore, Wentz or anybody they put back there wasn't going to look very good. So I do think that the most coveted positions, offensive line, unquestionably, and the Saints have shown that. Pass rush, edge pass rushers, and the Saints have shown that. Whether you think Davenport's good or not, they made an investment in him. Cam Jordan was an investment. Now they got to deal with Hendrickson and cornerback. And of course, I didn't mention quarterback, which is number one, of course. But to me, it's quarterback, offensive line, edge rushers, and cornerbacks. Those are the most important positions. Those are the ones you spend the most money on. Everybody says you need a linebacker, and I don't disagree with that. But in this day and age, you're playing nickel on first down much of the time, and you only need two linebackers by and large for much of the time that you play. And then you play with a hybrid otherwise. So therefore, is that really as important a position as it used to be?
With that said, let's talk a little bit about the quarterback position. Right now, it's Taysom Hill. Brayton has done everything in terms of going out and talking about his having a Winston back. What do you think happens there?
Well, it's an interesting dynamic. If you'd asked me the question during last season, and I said it on the radio consistently on the radio show, I did not think that the next Saints quarterback was on the roster last year during the season. My opinion changed for several reasons. One, they saw Taysom Hill for 4 games. 2, the cap issue became a significant item.
Absolutely.
So as a result, could you really afford to go out and get a guy? The answer is no, unless you make a trade and give up assets.
Yes.
So therefore, I think it's more likely that the next starting quarterback is on the roster presently. And there's a lot to like about both and some things not to like about both.
True.
And I think those things are obvious. I don't need to be the ultimate analyst to point those out, but ball security is A1. One guy that had 11 fumbles last year, the other guy that had 30 interceptions the year before.
Right.
So I think when it comes to the most important thing, what's the most important thing a quarterback can do? It's ball security,
Right.
taking care of the football, not giving possessions away. And both of these guys have exhibited the fact that they will give possessions away, which is not to say that's going to be the case moving forward. You can teach the old dog a new trick about ball security with fumbles. With the interceptions, it's all about teaching the old dog a new trick with decisions that you make. And I think the biggest question for both guys is decision making. With Jameis Winston, 5,000 yards, 30 some odd touchdowns, big arm, good size, clearly can make every throw, extremely talented guy. I think he can play in this league and win in this league. With Taysom Hill, good arm, unbelievable mobility, and and just a guy that's great athletically. So when you look at the two, they bring different things to the table. Both can make all the throws, but the biggest things are twofold about both of them: decision making, and ball security.
Well, the question is, 111 turnovers for Jason during his career, for Jameis during his career. Again, we see a small sample size for Taysom. Being in that quarterback room with Peyton and with Breeze, can that change these bad habits, for lack of a better term?
Well, I think the offensive structure will dictate some of that. And the Saints have had a structure that it's been closer to a West Coast approach than it has been anything, which means crossing routes and short outs and things of that nature and throwing to the running backs out of the backfield. Is that going to continue? I think it will, because it's part of the philosophy that Sean Payton has, along with Pete Carmichael. But I also think their philosophy is they'd like to get the ball down the field more. And they just didn't feel like they could do that for two reasons, not the least of which was the injuries to Drew Brees in his advancing age. The second part of that was not having Thomas, not having their deep threat for quite some time, and Deontay Harris because of injuries to him. So therefore, did they really have anybody that could get down the field? Sanders to a degree, but did they really have that personality? And by the way, Thomas isn't really that guy in the first place. He's more of a tough dude who makes the tough catches, runs the in routes, and takes the hits. The slant guy, the out guy, the fade guy, so to speak. He can do it all, and he's a great player, but he's not that burner. Deontay Harris is the most intriguing guy of the bunch because he's the guy that can absolutely, he's mercurial with his speed. He can run by anybody. And if you have a guy that can chunk it down the field and the defense knows that, then they might change that approach that they have in terms of how they play you.
I agree.
But I think how teams played the Saints had a lot to do with their lack of success when it mattered most.
Yeah, and of course also teams understanding the limitations of the quarterback at that
point. Well, that's what I'm getting at. And I think, and the other part of this, and don't underestimate this, Eric, is that when you get to the playoffs, the officiating crews and the league can say it all they want that we don't change our approach, but they do.
Of course they do.
They call the game differently. What do I mean by that? Go back and look at the playoff game with Tampa Bay. They had their hands all over these receivers the whole game. I mean, all over them the whole game. And I'm not trying to say that they won because of that, but they were allowed to do it. It was permissible, whereas in the regular season, at least a third of those, if not half, would have been flags. Not the case in the playoffs. So I think the way they played them was really significant, and the fact that their receivers couldn't separate and the quarterback could not push the ball down the field led to the conclusion you ended up with. Oh, by the way, it still took all those turnovers to lose that game.
Yes.
The Saints were up by 7 and driving, and Cook fumbled the ball. That was it. If you take, and you say anything you want about Breeze or the offense, if they don't fumble that ball there, I think they're winning the game. And I think we might be having a different discussion right now because Green Bay was anything but formidable the following week.
Right. Let's talk about Trey Hendrickson and Marcus Williams, two guys that are free agents. And a lot of people, the debate is: can you get one, or can you get both, or are you in a situation where both have to go? What are your thoughts?
Well, it's interesting because you hope Trey Hendrickson doesn't fall victim to these investments that I referenced previously.
Right.
because they made first-round investments in Jordan, who's never gone anywhere, and in Davenport, who's frankly been a disappointment.
Absolutely.
So it's time to say that now. It wasn't time to say that prior to this year, but we've had enough of a sample size to say he's not the player that they expected at this stage of his career. But they made the investment. So therefore, with those contracts, with those guys, what are you going to do with Davenport in a year's time? Okay, so you're facing that too. Hendrickson had a career year. He's a worker bee. He's a guy that earns it through working really hard. He doesn't have that one incredible skill. He's not a speed edge rusher. He's not a bull rusher. He's not a killer in the run game. He's just a working class, hard-working, max effort guy who gets the most out of his ability, and it all came together for a stellar season. And I think those are the kind of guys you want to stick with and reward because you know what kind of effort you're going to get all the time. I'm not going to sit here and tell you he's going to have double-digit sacks next year. He very well may not. But he would still be a very good to effective player. So do you want to keep him? Absolutely. Can you afford to? Don't know the answer. Marcus Williams had his best year this past year. He got a mandate and got called out publicly by his coach for not tackling. And this year, according to Pro Football Focus, he was among the top 5 tacklers in the league at his position. That's a marked improvement. He finds the football. Does he still make mistakes? Yes. He's a little bit late at times reacting, but he does find the ball. With interceptions, breaking up passes, and he's young in the game. And here's the other thing about Williams. While the Saints have Granderson, by the way, who can also fill downs and play outside, and Davenport and Cam Jordan, what do they really have at safety? If you don't bring this guy back, what do you have? You got Malcolm Jenkins for one more year, and then what do you have? Chauncey Gardner-Johnson's a hybrid playing in the slot as a hybrid between corner and safety. Could he play safety permanently? Possibly. But sometimes it's all about your current roster and the depth chart as to what becomes a bigger priority. And I think right now, the safety position, Williams is in a pretty good position because they're not very deep there.
Yep, no doubt. When you look at this team right now, to me, the emphasis has got to be on signing your own. And I don't know if there'll be big players in free agency. Maybe, again, dabbling just a bit around the edges. But to me, the priority is keeping this core together.
I think it's keeping the core together. If they dabble in free agency, it could be at one or two spots in particular that might come to mind. I mentioned linebacker earlier. That depends on how they view Zach Bond, frankly. Because I don't think they'll bring Anzalone back.
I agree.
So, and then Quan Alexander is a big ticket item, and he's not going to be able to play for quite some time, so who knows?
And
so
plus the $13 million with no dead money, he's going to be a cap casualty.
I think so. So therefore, that could be one area that they look at. Tight end could be an area because I don't expect Jared Cook to be back.
I agree.
And Troutman, while he shows some promise, you don't really know what you have yet. And that you got a solid guy in Josh Hill, never going to be a big threat in the passing game, but he's a solid player and important to their team. But is that enough? So that might be an area you might take a look at, and I would not totally rule out running back. You look at Latavius Murray, solid player, but injuries caught up with him this past year. He didn't play as much. If they viewed Dwayne Washington any differently, then wouldn't we have seen a little bit more of him by now? So if there's that guy out there, and as I mentioned earlier when we were talking about it, that's one position that people typically don't invest in, that they will fill in that fashion quite frequently.
But there is a difference between most running backs and Alvin Kamara in terms of what his skill set is. You're not going to easily find another Kamara type.
No, you got Derrick Henry, you got Christian McCaffrey, you got Alvin Kamara. I can name about maybe 5 to 8 guys, and that's it. That are the kind of guys that are franchise guys that you absolutely positively must have and you must invest in. So Kamara is that guy. There's no doubt about that. There's no perceivable weakness in his game. And when healthy, you saw what he can do this year and what he did in 2018. When not healthy, he wasn't quite the same in 2019, but they knew what we didn't know because they don't tell you about injuries. So they knew that he was nowhere near healthy. When the fan watches or when we watch and analyze, we say, boy, is this guy slipping already? No, he's not slipping. He's a great player.
No doubt. Ken Trahan of All Access, the Three Tailgaters, and CrescentCitySports.com is our guest. We'll take a quick break. We'll hear from our underwriters. When we come back, we'll talk some Pelicans. We'll jump into the college game. We'll talk LSU, UNO, Tulane, all that coming up here on Inside New Orleans Sports.
Burkhart Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration has been family owned and operated since 1989. Burkhart has energy-efficient solutions and offers brands such as Mitsubishi ductless AC units and Amana, the only manufacturer with a lifetime unit replacement warranty. Burkhart's offers maintenance bundle packages that include servicing your AC, generator, and tankless water heater. For more information on the services Burkhart's provides, visit acpromise.com. Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration, providing comfort for life.
Experiencing rough weather with a bad roof can be a nightmare. It doesn't have to be.
Suburban roofing, because when it comes to roofing, there is a difference.
Located at 3701 Iberville Street in Mid-City is Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Open 7 days a week, Katie's offers daily specials for lunch, dinner, and Sunday brunch. Serving New Orleans cuisine such as fried shrimp platters, grilled redfish, and a fully stocked bar. And don't forget about our expanded event seating and local entertainment. Featured on the Best of Food Network's diners, drive-ins, and dives, Katie's Restaurant and Bar.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. Our guest tonight is Ken Trahan of CrestCitySports.com. Ken, let's go to the Pelicans. 14-17 now. They're taking on Milwaukee tonight on a back-to-back. They're 11th in the West. They're one game out of the 10th spot, 3 games out of 7th place. Look, I've said consistently inconsistent. At times I see this team looks like it's ready to turn the corner, and then they just don't show up. It's hard for me to jump all in on this Pelican team. Your thoughts?
Well, you can't. Because they can't defend, and as long as you can't stop people, you can't outscore people every night.
True.
And look, when they've scored 128 points or more, they're like 7-1. Mm-hmm. Well, who can score 128 points every night?
Well, they're averaging 115.
Yeah.
And they're giving up 115.
Right. They're averaging 115, and they have a losing record.
Right.
So that tells you what you need to know. Listen, they win their last game, giving up 52.8% shooting from the field. So they have to outscore people to win. I don't think that's going to be a lot better. I think it could improve a little bit.
Okay.
But I think you are who you are. The only way it gets better significantly is with a change of the roster.
Okay.
I don't see that the current roster will be good enough defensively to threaten being a genuine contender. I just don't. And I love Steven Adams. Mm-hmm. He's a good acquisition. He's a good player.
Yes.
But when you talk about he and Zion on the floor at the same time on the defensive end, it's not that they're bad defenders. It's not that they have bad effort, but the league has changed. The league has gone to 3 and 4 guards and perimeter shooters all over the place.
Right.
And to stretch that 6'10", 6'11" center out on the floor ain't going to happen. And to stretch that 6'6" big body guy out on the floor isn't going to happen either. They can't reach shooters, and when the ball goes side to side, they have a tough time. They're chasing people constantly. So I think there's that issue. And then they're playing Billy Hernan Gomez, who's done a really nice job off the bench, but he's Steven Adams +1.
Right.
The same kind of guy who's a true center, who's not going to be able to play anybody outside of the 10-foot arc from the lane area down to the basket. So I think there's that. I don't think they're going to be any better defensively, but offensively they're very good. They're a top 10 team in the league offensively.
Yes.
And they're fun to watch. Zion Williamson's just absolutely incredible on the offensive end of the floor. He's doing some things that we haven't seen before. And, he gets all his points in the paint. Yeah, do you see how he gets them?
Right, exactly.
Against guys bigger than him, against double teams, against contact, off the bounce from the top of the circle. And by the way, he's proven to be incredibly effective as a point forward at the top of the circle. I think he's a better player, and they're a better team by playing him there.
I agree.
And by the way, every time he has 5 assists or more, they haven't lost. So, because he can pass the ball and does it well. Brandon Ingram's numbers are exactly the same in virtually every category as a year ago when he was an All-Star. He's still a good player.
Yes.
And a very good player who certainly merited All-Star consideration. But the guy that's really stepped up is Lonzo Ball. And I've been his harshest critic at times. But over the last 15 games, he's been exactly what you want him to be.
Exactly.
He's become a better shooter. He's made better decisions. He's getting assists. He's drawing the toughest defensive assignment with mixed results, but he's competing well and to the best of his ability on that end too. And the guy we've seen over the last 15 games is the guy we saw in the last month prior to the shutdown last year, which was a guy that's like, yeah, this guy's pretty good. If Drew Holiday was your next best player a year ago, the way Lonzo Ball's playing right now fits that role very, very well. So I think in all likelihood, he's taken himself out of that discussion about a trade, and Stan Van Gundy has reaped praise upon him recently. I don't think that's fake. On the other hand, I think Bledsoe and Redick will probably be gone.
I agree.
And I think they likely need to be, which is not a criticism of them at all, but
it's about fit.
By fit. You got an average guy in Bledsoe who's 30 plus.
Right.
You got a 37 in Redick who could help a contender shooting off the bench. And on top of that, you got Kyra Lewis Jr., who's quick, fast, can penetrate, sees the floor. Got to learn how to finish, but you look at his shot and you got to like his shot. It's a good-looking shot.
Yes.
I think he's going to be your starting point guard by next year, if not later this year, depending on how the season goes. If the season goes well and they're in contention, he won't be that guy. But if it doesn't, he may well be. And then, of course, the most intriguing guy in the enigma is Nikhil Alexander-Walker, because what's not to like about a 6'6" guy that can get to the rim and finish with either hand, is long, can handle a ball. Well, here's what's not to like. He shoots less than 28% from three-point range, and he turns the ball over. So he's an enigma. There's a lot to like and a lot to dislike.
But he needs time to on the court.
So therefore, are you willing to invest that in him? And if you're going to do so, it's going to have to be because you're running a 3 or 4 guard look, and your fifth has to be Zion.
Yes.
And again, which begs the question: long term, do you have a natural fit with Zion and Adams long term with this roster? They're good players, but are they a natural fit with the way the league is evolving and the way the best teams are and how they play? I mean, when they play teams like Phoenix that surrounds one guy, Ayton, with 4 shooters, how do you defend it? When they play Utah, when you got Gobert and 4 shooters, they can't. It's a bad matchup. They don't match up with these teams. Now, they beat Phoenix once here when they caught Phoenix on a good night, but Utah, I don't think they could beat Utah if they tried 10 times based upon what I've seen. Of course, nobody's beating them right now. So I like the offensive end. I don't like the defensive end. I'm intrigued. You got 2 young stars together, which is very positive. And you got a 3rd young star in Ball that makes it intriguing. So you've got to take the rest of that roster and make it more functional on the defensive end on a long-term basis. To me, that's really where it's at.
I also like Josh Hart a lot, too.
Oh, Josh Hart is the Energizer Bunny. I say that all the time. You get him off the bench, I don't know that there's a better rebounding guard in the league than Josh Hart. And he's shooting 37% from 3, so that's functional, pretty solid. He's not that consistent there, but the numbers say otherwise. It's fine. And he'll get to the basket off the drive. He has no fear. Love the guy.
Yeah. I'll give Griff a lot of credit here early on the trade for Anthony Davis. It is tough to get value back when you trade a top 5 player or a superstar when they're forcing their way out. But again, just on the small sample size that we have right now, Brandon Ingram is an all-star. Even though he didn't make it this year, he had all-star numbers, as you mentioned. Ball is coming into his own. I like the fact that he's becoming much more of a physical player as well, willing to go inside where he wasn't before. We know what Josh Hart has been. Again, to me, he's the glue of this team. And then, of course, the picks and the pick swaps, which, again, we don't know what that will be, but those are assets. It's about as good as you could have done, honestly.
Yes, I agree. And it's funny because doing radio shows, you get the people that disagree with you and some that agree with you. And I said at the time I thought they got the best package that they could have gotten from anybody.
Especially when Boston dropped off.
Everybody talked about Boston, and they weren't giving up Jason Tatum, okay? And if you couldn't get Jason Tatum, no matter what deal you made with them, you didn't want it.
That's right.
And I liked Jaylen Brown, and I liked Hayward at the time and all that, but that wasn't going to do it. It had to be Tatum, and once they weren't going to get Tatum, there's no way. They got the best deal. Then I heard from critics disagreeing with me, saying, well, they should have got Kuzma. Would you rather have Ingram or Kuzma?
Yeah, I'd rather
have Brandon Ingram. Are you kidding me? No disrespect to Kuzma.
Where's Kuzma?
Ingram's a better player. So Josh Hart has been all that for you. And Ball, if he continues the way he's playing now, yes, it does look like a good deal. You would hate to have gotten rid of Davis in the first place, but you were pushed into a corner, and you really had no choice. And he's not playing right now, by the way.
No. Let's talk about the second half of the schedule, then we're going to move on to the college game. 36 games in 67 days. Starting on March the 11th, they have the Timberwolves at home. It's 3 straight home games. They have that 5-day, which again, everybody's talking about right now, this cross-country road trip. Starts with Philadelphia, ends up with Golden State. It's a 7-day road trip from May 7th to the 14th. 8 back-to-backs at the end of the schedule. And of course, they're trying to get to that playoff tourney, which is the May 18th to the 21st. That is a tough stretch down, okay? The one thing they have going for them is they're a young team. But the one thing they don't have going for them, they're an inexperienced team.
They haven't won the back-to-back yet, by the way. And when you look at the schedule down the road, you start to think about some of the older teams. Maybe it does wear on them, and your younger legs will certainly come into play at that particular point in time. I think Stan Van Gundy's got the challenge of trying to parcel out minutes properly.
Right.
If you're a 36 to 38 minute guy, you want to be more like a 32 to 34 minute guy. Just those 4 or 5 minutes could make a difference for the next night. You got to win the game, obviously. That's the object. Of course, the best case scenario is to win the first game, get up by 20, and take people out. But that's easier said than done. So, yeah, that part of the schedule you spoke about is what I saw, too. And I just think that's incredibly difficult when you're talking about the East Coast all the way to the West Coast.
Hard.
And, oh, by the way, you're playing good teams.
Right. And you're in COVID-19 where, again, you're being sequestered. Okay, so it's not like you're going on these road trips. The guys have a chance to get out the hotel, et cetera. You're sequestered for that entire 7-day period. I mean, that's a hard part of it as well. Do you think that Griff is going to be a seller at the deadline? I mean, we've talked about JJ, we've talked about Eric Bledsoe. I think they got to get some dogs on defense. That's got to be the priority here. Do you think that he's going to be aggressive?
I think that if you can get one guy that can improve your defensive stature, you do it immediately. So somebody that can guard multiple positions, that's going to be an alpha dog personality. I give you a case in point, somebody like Patrick Beverly, who if he's on your team, you love him. If he's on the other team, you hate his guts.
Right.
He antagonizes everybody and tries to get under your skin. And I'm not saying Patrick Beverly, I'm just using him as an example. You want to go out and get that guy that wants to compete like a madman on the defensive end. There were some games where Drew Holiday disappeared on the offensive end, but he was such a force on the other end of the floor that he exerted so much energy that he didn't have much to give on the other end. You need that type of guy. Any team needs that, but this team in particular needs that, because the other part about it, that is a domino effect. Now you got that guy. Now your second best guy can play their next best guy rather than having to play their best guy. Now Lonzo Ball, instead of having to guard Dame Lillard, might be guarding McCollum. Right. I mean, just as an example. So it's a domino effect. It's kind of like the cornerback versus wide receiver situation in football. When you lose Lattimore, now all of a sudden Janoris Jenkins has to guard the best receiver, and now Chauncey Gardner-Johnson has to play your second best guy. That's a difficult task. You're asking more of a guy in that circumstance, like baseball and the rotations. When you have your ace going against their number 3, big difference, okay? So, yeah, matchups matter. So if you can get that one guy that can come in that can defend multiple positions, it's very clear the one area they have to address.
No doubt.
They out-rebound everybody. They're one of the best rebounding teams
and they're the best team
in the NBA.
paint.
And turnovers, they're getting better.
They are.
Regularly now. Regularly.
Right.
And then, as you mentioned, in the paint, they're destructive because of Adams cleaning up stuff, Hernan Gomez cleaning up stuff, and, of course, Zion Williamson doing what he does. So they're really good at paint. So, and they're still not that good from three-point range, but they've gotten better. Right. And another shooter would certainly help. If you subtract Redick, you lose a shooter.
Yes.
So there's that too, and you're going to have to replace that. So to me, it's a defensive stopper, unquestionably. Another shooter would be the other target.
I would agree. Can't get away from the Pelicans without talking about the All-Star selection. I went back. I did the research on both Brandon Ingram and Zion. Look, both were deserving. It's very difficult to put two players from a sub-500 team on the All-Star team, especially when you talk about the coaches that have to vote here. But let's face it. When you talk about Zion, he's not just the face of the franchise. He's probably the future face of the NBA. He was going to make it. With that said, I think we both agree Brandon Ingram was deserving.
Brandon Ingram was deserving, but I think I agree with Van Gundy. Van Gundy said after the game when they beat Detroit that he doesn't understand why the roster limit for the All-Star game is what it is. That they should expand it by 3.
Absolutely.
Because ultimately, no one wants to play big minutes in the All-Star game, number one. Number 2, it enhances the opportunity for you to provide the recognition for deserving players. A Major League All-Star game, it basically got 25 guys.
Right.
You can fill out a roster and give guys who might not even get on the field in that game the recognition they deserve. And I certainly believe that that's applicable in this situation. So I think he's right about enhancing the rosters by enlarging the rosters, and I think that would solve the problem. Look, Devin Booker got in only because Anthony Davis is hurt. Devin Booker's team, Phoenix, is significantly better than the Pelicans, and he's having an incredible year. But it took an injury for him to get in. So that's how hard it is to make the All-Star game. So I'm not surprised that Ingram didn't make it. Were the Pelicans a winning team, maybe he would have had a better shot.
Shift gears to the college game. Let's start with LSU first. Let's talk LSU basketball. 14-7 overall, 9-5 in the SEC, third overall. got a big game Saturday against Arkansas coming up. They're still top 30 in RPI. So, again, they're still there. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts are I'm going to take a sip
Go
of
ahead.
water before I talk about
There you
LSU
go.
because that's how I feel about them.
Yeah. You know, but look, when you look at the SEC right now.
Oh, man. Let me tell you that. And the reason I did that intentionally,
Sure, right.
I didn't really need it, but they're so frustrating to watch. I almost don't want to watch them because you can watch what they do against Auburn. You can watch what they do against Texas Tech until the final minute. And you say, man, this is a top 20 team. This is a top 4 seed.
Right.
And then they look like a team that doesn't belong in the NCAA tournament. Why? Inconsistency to the hilt. I think coaching has to be taken into consideration with that. I think we'd be not fulfilling our responsibility as analysts to say that didn't figure. I think the team reflects the coach. They're up and down. And Will Wade's done a good job. Not a great job, but a good job. He's gotten good players. The one thing they've never had is depth.
Right.
So if they get in foul trouble, they got problems. Their frontline players are pretty good, 4 in particular, but do they really have depth? But then more than that, it's the same Pelican discussion. They don't want to defend.
No,
so many games they give up 91 points to Georgia.
Come on.
I mean, Georgia, come on, man. Seriously? They don't have Anthony Edwards, and they weren't that good with him.
Right.
And they're not that good now, and they got whipped at Stegman. And there's no way that should have happened. You have better players.
Right.
So now they're going to Arkansas against a red-hot team,
Oh, they are.
ranked 20th in the country.
8 in a row in the SEC
Yeah,
right now?
they're playing great. So we all know what's going to happen. LSU is going to go play great and win, right? So because that's who they are. They tease you to the nth degree. They look so good, and then they let you down. So it's hard to quantify, and it's hard to qualify just who they are. Cam Thomas, leading scoring freshman in the country. Watford's a really good player. Smart's a really good player. Days is a really good player. Those guys are good. But then you look at the rest and you say, okay, where's it coming from, and what happened to the rest of the recruits, and what about the depth that exists there? So there's those things to consider. They're a good team, but they're too inconsistent to be a team that you can think will get past the second round of the tournament.
Let's talk about Tulane. They're 9-10, 4-10 the American. They're currently in ninth place. Still kind of a rebuilding situation at Tulane. I keep hearing from the analysts that it's not this year, it's next year when we're really going to see Tulane shine.
Well, when have they shined over the past 2 decades?
Been a long
the answer
time.
is
Been a long time
never.
since they rocked and rolled.
Terry Clark left in 2001.
Right.
So, listen, it's been coach after, and these coaches weren't bad coaches, okay?
Right.
The Sean Finney's, the Dave Dickersons, the Ed Conroy's.
Right.
Of course, the Dunleavy previously. It's not like they didn't have guys who could coach. It's a tough place. It's hard to recruit to. The conference is pretty good. But I do think Hunter has done an admirable job to this point. What he has to get to is more 4-year players.
Yeah.
If there is such a beast in college basketball
Right.
anymore. Jalen Forbes is a good player. They've got a couple of pieces that are pretty solid. They show some promise at times. When they compete with really good teams, they can't win. They got whipped by Memphis. Houston demolished them, but Houston's really good.
Yep.
I think we've seen a slight uptick in that program, and that's what you want to see. Rome wasn't built in a day. I think we start to find out more about Coach Hunter by next season, post-pandemic, 3 years to recruit, and see how much we've improved this product. And the quick fixes, you can take 1 or 2 of those, but you have to get incoming freshmen that can play.
Right.
And I think they need more of those.
UNO currently 7th in the Southland, so they would qualify for the tournament. They are 6-13, 5-6. Your thoughts?
They won their last 2 games, playing better, got a big man now that gives them a little bit of depth that wasn't playing previously. And they've got, St. Hilaire's played pretty well recently. Troy Green's a good player. They don't have, same issue. They don't have great depth. They don't have much in the way of size on their team, but they've played better. They played a tough schedule early on. They suffered for it with a record. So the record is not maybe the greatest indicator of who they are. You want to be playing your best at the right time for them. The goal is to be in the tournament, obviously. So they need to continue this current trend. We'd like to see them get back to where they were when they made the NCAA tournament a few years back. Wasn't too long ago now.
Right.
So is it possible? I think it is in that conference, which, by the way, that conference is going to change significantly again here very soon.
Instead of me going individually with the baseball teams, why don't I just ask you this with 3 minutes left in the show? Talk to me about Louisiana baseball.
Well, I think it's good. LSU is going to be it's all about their offense and whether or not they're going to hit enough. Their left side of their infield's a question mark. Frontline pitching will be good. Fondo will be a good closer. And so they're an NCAA team, but again, they play in the toughest league in the nation. So are they going to be the 3rd best team, the 5th best team, the 6th best team in their league? Therein lies the question. Tulane was on their way to being exactly what everybody hoped they would be a year ago. They finally were breaking through. They had a really good team last year, and unfortunately, the pandemic crushed them. Oltoff's an elite pitcher. Their offense is not quite what it was last year, but it's been pretty good thus far this year. So, and they lost a couple of really tough games to the Raging Cajuns, 2-2 going into the weekend, and we'll find out a lot this weekend. If they can win a game in Starkville against an elite team, then I would signal that they're pretty good. UNO has a couple of really good position players. Luther Willard's really good. The second baseman is really good. Willis is a 4-year guy at shortstop, and Colin Cullivan's a good pitcher too. So Blake Dean's got a chance to compete. They were picked 6th in their league. Southeastern's picked 3rd, and they're pretty good. But for UNO, it's all about pitching depth. So if you look at pitching depth, that's what's going to tell the story for them. But they're going to be competitive in the Southland, no question about it.
How about some of the other state teams?
Well, I think Raging Cajuns served notice that they're pretty good, even though LSU whipped them this week. What they did against Tulane was impressive. Louisiana Tech's got good hitting. They haven't fared that well early on, but they're a pretty good hitting team. So I certainly think you have to take a pretty serious look at them in terms of the NCAA tournament. Southeastern, as I mentioned, they can hit. They've got a lot of returning players from a year ago. I like their team. Matt Roser's done a great job overall, and Nick Ray from Jesuit's a good player. And then when you look at, if you go down to the next ranks, junior college, LSU Eunice is elite in Division II. Delgado's really good in Division I. And they're off to a 6-1 start. And they've got 2 guys transfer from Nichols who are lights out. Braden Jobert, the LSU signee, and their third baseman, who's really good also in Leger, Ethan Leger. So Joe Sherman's got a good team. So look, baseball's always good in Louisiana, and it certainly will be again this year.
No doubt. We got about a minute and a half. Tulane's class, LSU's class.
Like them both. I think Willie Fritz is up the ante with what he's done. It's mostly quote-unquote 3-star guys, which is, and you still get the critics, why can't they get that quote-unquote 4-star or 5-star? Well, good luck with that. You're competing with Power 5s. It's pretty hard. Now, if you finally break through and get one, maybe the floodgates open a little bit, but it's easier said than done. Bottom line is they have a quarterback for a couple more years who's really good.
And you like the backup too, right?
Backup's good too. I like Justin too. I think they're set there at that position, and yet they signed one anyway. And then, of course, at LSU, I thought they had a very good class. And I think that their problems were 1 year in the making, and that was it, providing you don't have the off-the-field distractions that tear the program down. Because I think talent-wise, they're back. And, oh, by the way, their quarterback room, superb.
Yes, no doubt about it. Ken, always a pleasure. Thanks so much. And again, checking you out on 106.1, 6 o'clock during the week, and then starting at 10 o'clock on Saturday morning.
Saturday morning, and go to CrescentCitySports.com.
Always a pleasure. Thanks so much.
You got it, buddy.
All right, thanks so much for tuning in. Look, plenty of ways to be able to catch our program on the rebroadcast. Rebroadcast tonight, every Thursday, 6 p.m. right here on WLAE-TV. We got The Deuce, 10 p.m. on WLAE-TV2 every Thursday night. Friday night, 9 o'clock, Pelican Sports Television. That's across Southeast Louisiana. Also, 10 o'clock on WLAE-TV. 2 a.m. on Saturday morning if you're up on The Deuce. And then on 5 p.m. on Pelican Sports Television. Remember, we're also, as you know, live streaming on YouTube now each and every Thursday when we go live here at 1 o'clock. You catch all the previous episodes on Inside New Orleans, of Inside New Orleans Sports on my website, ericasher.com, also my social media platforms, as well as the WLAE-TV YouTube page. You can catch me and Ken Trahan on 106.1. I'm 4 to 6, he's 6 to 7. Of course, you can listen live to my program at ericasher.com, iHeartRadio app, TuneIn Radio app, and the podcast available at all the major podcasting platforms. Again, special thanks to Ken Trahan for joining us on the program. Fantastic job as always. Also to our fantastic sponsors, man, who make this program possible. These great underwriters. Please support those underwriters. And again, special thanks to our group here at WLAE-TV. Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Tommy Fairley, Tommy O'Connor, Carolina Loretto, and my director, William Hill. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next week for another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. For Ken Trahan, I'm Eric Asher. Thanks so much.